there's a big comic book movie coming out starting today. Obviously, there's already been previews. It sounds like they're going to go well over $100 million on the first weekend for The Batman from Warner Brothers. And I'm wondering, as someone who hasn't seen the film, because I am in the Philippines and the nearest theater is almost 5 hours away, is this film good? Luckily for me, I do have friends in high places, award-winning comic book editor and writer Joe Corallo. You saw the preview. How you doing, Joe?
I did. I'm good, thanks. I saw it, and I had a great time.
Well, as someone who hasn't seen it, we're going to do non-spoiler talk about the things that worked in this film. Maybe you can answer a few questions of mine. Now, certainly from the trailers, it looked like a very grisly, kind of grim movie. Felt like it was a combination of a traditional Batman story, but in like the movie Seven. Is that what an apt description of what it ended up being?
I think that is a pretty apt description. It definitely leans into the like misery porn kind of angle of these things.
Well, certainly there's been some dark takes on Batman within the film universes. One of the big concerns I had, here on the channel, I think other people had, was Robert Pattinson stepping up as Bruce Wayne. He looked pretty good in the Batman costume itself, but he kind of looked out of place as a billionaire, even orphan. He was obviously a young man in the film. Was Robert Pattinson the right choice for a Bruce Wayne into the year one type situation?
This isn't really a spoiler because they established this right in the beginning of the movie. This is a like year two scenario. He's been Batman for a little bit. I think he works fine as Bruce. He's not the charming sort of confident Bruce you get in like Batman the Animated Series, or like kind of like like Michael Keaton and like that era of Batman. But it's closer to probably Christian Bale's interpretation, but a little different. It's like they My Chemical Romance it up ever so slightly. I only saw the movie the one time. These things take time. I'd have to watch it again. I'd have to watch some of the other ones again, but I feel like he was overall better in both the roles. There is no weird Batman voice, and his Bruce, he's lost in a way, because it is that year two. You're hitting that sort of like, is what I'm doing making a difference or not kind of stuff. They hint in that into the previews and all that, but he's, fighting the good fight, but is it going to get him what, he wants and hopes for the city of Gotham?
I personally think Gotham is one of the greatest supporting characters in comic book history. So definitely need to nail a Gotham. You got to nail an Alfred, and then you have to nail Commissioner Gordon. How are those characters?
I really like this Gotham. It is probably the grittiest, sleaziest Gotham we've seen.
Like a city of crime type of Gotham?
Yeah. You're not safe. It's rainy. It's dismal. Crime is rampant. So I really like that element of it, because even in the Nolan films, especially I think Dark Knight Rises, like even though there's all these awful things going on, it's still like bright, and Gotham still feels like a clean like city, and that is not present here at all. This is a very gritty, grimy Manhattan in the 80s kind of feel to it. I mean, it looks contemporary, but it's very clearly like based off Manhattan. The crime, the way people are acting, the things people are doing, it feels more lived in than previous instances of Gotham. And Gordon, I really like Gordon in it. He's a different kind of Gordon than the previous Gordons we've seen. He's still, the uncorrupted cop in this instance. He's trying to figure out who he can trust and all of that. And he trusts Batman. Like that's the kind of Gordon we're dealing with. And I think he does a good job. He's more subdued. He's not as powerful a presence as like Gary Oldman on screen, but it works here.
So let's get over the villains. Those were some of the more interesting casting choices. Obviously, the big villain in this, it felt like Riddler was villain number one. Catwoman was playing kind of a, bridge between Batman and the villains. And then you had kind of Penguin sitting in the background. At least that's what it kind of feels like. How was Paul Dano's Riddler? Because it looked like a really strange take on the character.
It's definitely elements of like the Zodiac Killer, Jeffrey Dahmer kind of vibes from him at points. It's not a Riddler we've seen really in an adaptation before, and it's really not a Riddler we've seen in the comics before either. Even in the comics, he's kind of like a joke.
Everyone thinks of Jim Carrey with the Riddler in a film, and he certainly hammed it up, and he was a lot of fun, play with the cane, and it was all kind of, I don't know, shtick really more than like a meaty criminal character. It certainly feels like they went a different direction here with Paul Dano. Pretty disturbing, to be completely honest. It sounds like that's exactly what comes through when you start naming off some of those serial killers. Was the Penguin a big role? You know, obviously you get a pretty big name actor in there. Completely unrecognizable.
Colin Farrell was fantastic. While he's not the main villain by any stretch, his role was bigger in the movie than I thought it was going to be.
So he's not just there to set up him being the villain in the second movie.
Yeah, he's not there just to set that up, but yeah, he is there, and he's a presence, and he's someone that Batman has to deal with throughout the film. So
one of the things a lot of people are talking about, obviously, is Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. Selena Kyle, new take on the character. She's certainly challenging Bruce within the trailers that we've seen. Like, who are you going to be? Are you good? Are you evil? Type of thing.
It leans into what I think people were expecting and what they usually do in these situations of like the will they, won't they kind of stuff, building on the tension. There's definitely flirtation, sexual tension, things like that. She was fantastic. Obviously, they take a lot from things like Batman Year One for her like portrayal. She definitely fits in as like another Gothamite who is part of this really, slimy, gritty sort of underground. She's sort of a vehicle that kind of helps navigate us through that.
Zoe Kravitz is an interesting actress. Whenever she's on screen, I believe you've noticed her. Like, she stands out from the crowd. She has a presence on the screen. We've never seen her take such like a kind of a big meaty role in such a large film. Does she have superstardom in her future? Is this the jumping off point?
This is such a high budget ensemble cast kind of movie. Despite that, a lot of her interactions are, different fight scenes or like one-on-one with, Robert Pattinson, things like that. So I think it remains to be seen. She'll have to be in a couple of other movies, and we'll see where that goes. We can think of plenty of other examples of, basically just about anyone who was in Game of Thrones who's then tried to like use a movie as a vehicle has not really gone terribly well. But like, yeah, so I think the potential's there. We'll see if her and her agent and all that are able to capitalize on it.
The director they brought in was Matt Reeves. He was the man behind the Apes franchise. And as someone who's actually seen all the original Planet of the Apes, I saw the Mark Wahlberg, Tim Burton monstrosity. And then I've seen the Matt Reeves movies. They are absolute quality. Didn't know that I was going to love his interpretation of Gotham and Batman. Some of the things he said threw off a few warning sides, but you know that he's technically a great director. He gets good performances off.
There's style and flair to this movie, but it's not overly stylized. In terms of the amount of style and flair, probably closer to like something like Batman 89, where it's like you can tell it's a Burton movie. It's a Batman movie that Tim Burton directed, not a Tim Burton movie that has Batman in it. So it does feel like this is a Batman movie that's directed by Matt Reeves, as opposed to like a Matt Reeves film that has Batman in it.
Sounds like it was a winner in your mind. So you would recommend this film. Is there anybody you don't think would like this? Is this not for comic fans? Is this not for younger fans? Like who do you think this is really geared toward, and who's really going to get the most enjoyment?
I think people like, 30s to 50s will probably enjoy it. There are a few things about it. It is a hard PG-13, very hard PG-13. You will forget it's a PG-13 movie throughout watching it. If you're taking kids to see it, like, keep that in mind. I know parents have different things that they, decide on their own, what's appropriate, what's not. While this isn't an overly, sexualized film, there is, pretty intense violence at points. And there's also a lot of moments of, again, like they really lean into like the misery. Be mindful of that. If you are a hardcore comics fan, like there's different kinds of hardcore fans. If you like the Nolan films, I think you'll probably like this. If you're a stickler for things, if there are certain things where it's like Batman needs to be this, and this, like the Riddler has to be like this. If that's going to drive you crazy that he's more like the Zodiac killer and not the Riddler, like that might be a problem for you. You have to kind of like disconnect yourself from that and approach it as something where it's Batman. It has that tone and feel kind of like the closer to the Nolan films than anything else. If you feel like Alfred has to be, a certain type, like he's a little different. Like a lot of these characters are different, and you just got to kind of enjoy it because I don't want to spoil anything, but they very much meander away from the source material throughout the movie. I think it's to the benefit of the movie because it kind of keeps you on your toes because you're not sure what to expect. Other people, and I've been that other person before, where when that happens in a movie, I'm like, forget this, and
I got you. So speaking of the source material, beforehand they had suggested, in some Batman trailers at the end that people go read Batman Year One by Frank Miller, Batman Ego by Darwin Cook, I believe Batman The Long Halloween from Jeff Loeb. Is that about right? Were those kind of the inspirations for the film?
Year One is probably the heaviest inspiration. Long
Might
Halloween,
be the best Batman movie ever.
Yeah, Long Halloween, it's like just a little bit. I think tonally, City of Crime is there. Not the story at all, but just in terms of it being like it's this grimy city and you don't know who to trust, and it starts off bad and it only gets worse, like that kind of thing. Like if you're familiar with Year One, a few other things like that level of like dark Batman, you'll be fine.
So there may be people here who've seen the Batman film. Maybe they've never read a comic book, and if this has got their juices flowing for this version of Batman, are there any recommendations outside of The Long Halloween, Year One, and Ego, which I definitely recommend to everybody to read it regardless if you like this movie because there's such good comic books that maybe they should go check out because there might be a comic book that they love just waiting for them to discover.
I think No Man's Land is always great to tap back into. There's omnibus editions out. I don't know if the trades are still in print. Like it gets wonky when they're putting out new editions, but I'm pretty sure you can still get The Road to No Man's Land and No Man's Land omnibus, and they're online as well. So I'd recommend that. I'd recommend Jerry Conway's run on Batman deals with a lot of like the corruption within the city and the government and how they're going to deal with Batman. I think, people would get something out of that as well. I'd also recommend the anything from like, I'm going to butcher his name, but like Lee Bermejo, like
Lee Bermejo.
Bermejo, yeah. Like his style and flair, I see that a lot in the book. So you might like something like Joker from Brian Azzarello. And him, I think that would be... Batman
Damned, which is a weird take on Batman, but has some beautiful art by Bermejo as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I think that kind of stuff. And it doesn't take a lot from this at all. I think it's really like some of the design of the suit, but that's about it, is Batman White Knight. Now, I'd recommend that as well, I think, especially in terms of like modern Batman stuff. If you like this, check that out. White Knight has a much wider variety of like villains and goes into characters like the Joker and Harley Quinn, which really isn't what this movie is about. But yeah, I think all of that stuff would be good for people to check out from this.
Well, the $1 million question, you brought the character up. I was trying to avoid it. Is Joker in the movie?
Joker's not really in the movie.
He's in the movie. He flinched. He's trying not to give spoilers. I knew it. Well, there you go, folks. Joker may be in the film or may not be. Definitely big thanks to Joe Corallo. And I do want to say, let me get rid of Joe here for a second. If you're looking for a Batman take that's similar perhaps to this, the screenwriter of the film, Matt Santallan, recently had a comic book called Batman the Imposter with an artist named Andrea Sorrentino. This is a beautiful comic book. It's very, very highly executed. Certainly not going to be the same thing as the Batman, but if you're looking for something with similar tone that is very well executed, definitely check this comic book out because I think you'll like it and you might be a comic book reader.